All right, starting the lineup right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Well, we thought Utah would win big. We thought BYU would win big. And guess what? They did exactly that, leaving no element of doubt whatsoever.
Okay, so I've done everything I can, Scotty, to simplify what is needed to finish the season for both BYU and Utah fans, okay? I'm going to make it as simple as I can possibly make it. So when you're sitting at the water cooler and you're talking to your Utah friends, or you're talking to your BYU friends, I'm going to make it as simple as I possibly can. Very easy for BYU. All they got to do is win out.
That's it.
They're in the Big 12 championship.
2 games.
Very easy. Win out, you're in the Big 12 championship. Split 1-1, you're out. You're not going to make it. You split 1-1, you're out. You will be buried behind either Arizona State or Utah. So you have to win out. And you'll be in that Big 12 championship against Texas Tech. For Utah, it's very, very simple. Very simple. Utah's got to win out, go 2-0 against the Kansas schools, and they need Cincinnati to win out.
Yeah.
That's it. By the way, very possible Cincinnati could win out. Now, they've lost back-to-back games, but this is a very good football team. Now, one of those teams they got to face is BYU coming up this weekend.
Yep.
BYU can ruin all of Utah's dreams by just beating Cincinnati coming up this weekend. If Cincinnati wins out and Utah win out, Utah's in the Big 12 championship.
Who's Cincinnati's final game?
BYU and TCU.
That's right. Okay.
BYU and TCU.
So they stay at 2 wins. That muddles up the pile at 2 wins.
Yep.
Or 2 losses, excuse me.
At 2 losses, and Utah with the head-to-head.
With that.
And Cincinnati winning gives them, Utah, the win over better winning percentage teams. Mm-hmm. And that puts Utah into the championship game against Texas Tech. Now, so here's just very simple. Tell your friends, all we got to do is win out if you're a BYU fan, okay? If you're a Utah fan. All we got to do is win out. Cincinnati just has to win out. And, by the way, BYU, a 2.5-point favorite coming up this weekend in Cincinnati. Like one of the first times they've been a favorite on the road.
Yeah.
And so a 2.5-point favorite over Cincinnati.
By the way, another big noon kickoff.
Another big noon kickoff going to be showing up there. So really fun, and which I'm glad because we need to continue to press the information on BYU because nobody's getting it. Nobody's picking up on it. And I've put together a few things today to talk about to kind of accentuate what BYU's done to this point in the season and what it would mean if they did finish 2-0 against Cincinnati and UCF. So we'll get into a couple of those things. But for Utah fans, just say, oh, man, all we got to do is win out and Cincinnati win out, which is very possible.
Oh, very possible.
Cincinnati's a very good team, and maybe they're just shook up and ticked off enough that they find a way to get that win over BYU, and then they would beat TCU. If Cincinnati were to find a way to get BYU, they would beat TCU.
So it essentially comes down to this game, Cincinnati, BYU.
It comes down to this game.
Yep.
BYU can end it for Utah.
Yes. So the other, a week or two ago, if you were a Utah fan, you were cheering for BYU to beat Texas Tech. Now, guess what? BYU fans, you can bring it all to a screeching halt with just 1 win against Cincinnati.
That's right. You beat Cincinnati, and it pretty much everything but wraps it up for Utah to get into the Big 12 championship. Now, there is still a case to be made. If Utah were to beat the 2 Kansas schools and BYU went undefeated from here on out, 2-0, beating Cincinnati and UCF, BYU meets up with Texas Tech in the championship. Depending on what happens in that championship, Utah is going to be sitting in the top 10.
Yes.
If Utah beats Kansas State and Kansas, by the way, the line opened at 16.5 for Utah against Kansas State.
I think it was actually 17.5. I think it's dropped.
It's moved down.
Yeah, it was like 17.5. I was like, okay.
And by the way, I've got an explanation for that in a minute too. We got so much to get to, but Cincinnati is a very good team. That's a very, very good team. Now Utah put the blueprint out there. They showed the world how you beat Cincinnati, and you just put all the focus on Sorsby. And Tawi Walker, really good running back. I was watching a little bit of film this morning. Really good running back. Sorsby is the engine that runs that offense. And that defense, there is room to pick apart that defense. We'll talk about that as we go through the week too. But it's really simple. It's really simple. If Utah were to win the last 2, depending on what happens in that championship game, I do think Utah's going to be in the top 10. Utah could get a bid. They could get a wild card bid. If Texas Tech blew out BYU in the championship game and Utah showed, again, 20-plus point victories over Kansas and Kansas State, I have to believe that the committee is going to look at Utah and say, we need to see what this team is.
Yeah.
We got to see who they are.
And I know we've gone back and forth on this, and I threw that out to, was it Shehan? I threw it out to somebody, and he's like, no. One-loss BYU team with a head-to-head, even if they lose in a blowout to Texas Tech, would still get in over Utah. And I'm like, I don't know, because you look at the respect being shown Utah by the polls and by the College Football Playoff Committee. I wouldn't feel that comfortable about that if I were a BYU fan. I think that you have to show well in that conference championship game against Texas Tech.
By the way, that is a really broad statement. Show well. It's a broad statement
It is.
that we can narrow down a little bit. All that means is you got to be in the game going into the fourth quarter.
Because even though that game was 29-7, which doesn't indicate a huge blowout, there was no point BYU, you really felt like in the second half BYU was in that game.
No point. Not even close.
Yeah. And so that late touchdown.
Texas Tech smothered. Okay. Yeah. I say not even close, but I will say that turned in the first quarter when Parker Kingston dropped the fumble.
Yes. Yeah.
So when it all turned.
But in the second half.
Fans engaged. Yeah. Players, and that was the first quarter. So fans engaged, players engaged, everybody engaged. And sitting in the booth, it was like, okay, you're going to have to find an extra possession here with a turnover. Something's going to have to go BYU's way if they want to have any chance in this. And at that point, Texas Tech just ran away with it. So, yeah, it was very quick, and it was just all Texas Tech. In that championship game, BYU is going to have to be in the game in the fourth quarter and can't have a fourth quarter like Utah did against Texas Tech.
Yep.
Let's just say that Utah-Texas Tech game plays out for Utah or for BYU and Texas Tech in the championship game. They'll leave BYU out. Agree?
I agree.
How many points did Texas Tech put on Utah in the fourth quarter?
It was it? I can't remember, but the final was what, 34-10? And it was a 3-point game going into fourth quarter.
It was 13-10 at the,
so they put
8:40 mark.
So they put 21 points up late in the fourth quarter.
Yes.
I will give you
they scored that touchdown like around 8:40.
24 points in the fourth quarter. Okay. If you replayed that game, Texas Tech and BYU's in it through three quarters, it was 10-3 all the way through the third quarter, 10-3 for Utah and Texas Tech. And if you play that out and then BYU gives up 24 points in the fourth quarter and it finishes 34-10 to Texas Tech, I think the committee leaves them out. I feel like there has been such a negative emphasis placed on BYU by pollsters and committee. And what I'm having a hard time with is explaining it, because I was going through their records. Scotty, BYU is 4-1 against Power 4 teams with a winning record. They're 4-1 against Power 4 teams with a winning record. They're 5-1 against FBS teams with a winning record. Those wins are against ECU, who's 7-3.
Good win.
On the road.
Yeah.
Arizona, who's 7-3. On the road. Utah, who's 8-2, who's beloved by everybody at home. Iowa State, who's 6-4 on the road. And TCU at 6-4 at home. Those are your 5 wins. And by the way, that stacks up against pretty much everybody in the top 10 right now in college football. Talking about wins against Power 4 teams with a winning record. It's as good as there is. Okay, I'll give you for instance. Utah right now has beat 2 teams with winning records. That's it. Arizona State, who's 7-3, and Cincinnati at 7-3. Baylor's at 5-5, so they're 500.
Yeah.
That was still a good whooping. They beat Colorado, who's 3-7, West Virginia, who's 4-7, Wyoming, who's 4-6, and UCLA, who's 3-7. And look at all the praise that gets heaped on them. BYU beat ECU, who's 7-3 on the road, Arizona 7-3 on the road, Utah, who's beloved and praised, who's now 8-2 at home, Iowa State, who's 6-4 on the road, and TCU 6-4 at home. How are people still holding BYU underwater?
Computer nerds love Utah.
Because the statistics. Okay, so now here's my push for Utah.
Yeah.
Here's the margin of victories in those games.
Yes.
33 against UCLA, 25 points against Wyoming, 34 against West Virginia, 32 against Arizona State, 46 against Colorado, 31 against Cincinnati, and 27 against Baylor. That's their margin of victory. So that's why the nerds love them.
Yes.
Because if you go look at their offensive numbers and their defensive numbers, and you look at margin of victory, there are very few teams in the country that match those numbers. And nerds love numbers.
Yeah, they do. They do.
But I don't understand how the nerds don't love a 5-1 record against winning FBS teams and a 4-1 record against winning FBS Power 4 teams.
I think there's also some people that when they have watched BYU, look, BYU's been relegated to a lot of 8 o'clock games, and I think that plays into it a little bit. I don't think you've got a lot of East Coast people watching BYU just based on a good chunk of their start times. I think people look at the Colorado game where they're like, ooh, Deion Sanders is coaching. Let's watch that game. And Colorado jumped on BYU early, and BYU had to rally to come back and win that game. There's been a couple of those games that BYU's had to rally after being down and coming back. If you just look individually at eyeball tests, in the games that Utah's won, they've won so in massive convincing fashion. BYU has had to have some come-from-behind victories. They've had a little bit more drama.
A couple of 14s and a 10.
But at the end of the day, Hans, isn't this about head-to-head?
Yeah, should be.
And look, I'm not knocking on Utah. Look, I think Utah's great. And if Utah
I think they're fantastic.
If Utah were to play BYU again, I think it's a 50-50 shot.
If you play that game 10 times, it's probably 5-5.
Yeah. And so, look, this isn't any disrespect to Utah at all. I think Utah deserves all the respect they're getting. It just seems interesting that BYU is playing catch-up to Utah.
I don't get it. Because when you break down the records, the teams they've won, doing it on the road, beating Utah's their best win.
Yes.
And BYU fans should feel really proud of that. And Utah fans should feel good about that because, you're one of your worst losses of your two is against a very good BYU team. And by the way, Utah fans are having a hard time pubbing up BYU, even though pubbing up BYU makes their record look a lot better.
Yep.
But Utah fans should be screaming from the mountaintops that BYU is a top 5 team in the country and that Utah lost to 2 top 5 teams in the country. That's what Utah fans should be screaming.
Yeah.
Because when it comes down to the committee picking the wild cards to push into the 12-team bracket, those two games better look pretty good for you.
So
if you don't make it to the Big 12.
All right, so let me ask